NFL Insiders on the air, and following this timeline, 10:06 a.m. Eastern, the Kansas City Chiefs announced the signing of free agent running back C.J. Spiller. KC marks the fourth team for Spiller in the past 5 months. 11:28 a.m. Eastern, Jags Executive VP of Football Operations Tom Coughlin, speaking with local media today, didn't completely commit to quarterback Blake Bortles as the starter, but didn't give an indication that the team would be moving away from him either. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome in our cast today. Field Yates, Jim Trotter, Mark Dominic. I'm Susie Culver. Let's start off here with a quick reaction to those tough words by Coughlin.
No, it was about time, because if you look at Blake his first 3 years, he hasn't completed more than 59% of his passes in a season. He has thrown at least 16 interceptions every season, and he's got 1 pick six for every victory, which is 11. So when you have that, that's a tough way to go, and maybe they want to bring in competition for him now. Now you start to wonder if they'll reach out to a veteran quarterback if he's on the market. What if a Jay Cutler is out there free? Is that a guy you would want to bring in and compete with a young guy to try and motivate him? Who knows at this point, but clearly Tom Coughlin is sending a message.
There's the numbers that Jim just illustrated to sort of paint the picture of his career trajectory. Then there's just what you see when you watch him. His second year after, a rookie year, which you always have the usual caveats there, promise some notable improvement. This past year, a real spike downwards for Blake Bortles, not just in terms of production. His mechanics were completely out of whack. That was apparent to anybody who watched him last season.
Yeah, when you see him, I think that's the one thing I know that he's doing this offseason. He's going back out to the West Coast to work on those mechanics once again to see if he can get his game back to where it has to be. Critical year for him because they've got that fifth-year option that they've got to decide whether they even want to exercise that, and assuming that they do, that's a huge number. So I understand Coach Coughlin's trepidation on this one.
All right, so we have tough talk from Coughlin, more of an ominous tone from Vikings GM Rick Spielman talking to reporters yesterday. So let's head to Minnesota, where there are a number of question marks, starting with the future of Adrian Peterson, who turns 32 next month and has the highest cap hit of any running back in the NFL. Then there's the health of Teddy Bridgewater, who missed last season after suffering a gruesome knee injury in practice. The Vikings have Sam Bradford signed through next season. Will Minnesota be able to retool their offensive line after being plagued by injuries? Former 4th overall pick Matt Khalil finished the season on IR and will be a free agent. And what can they expect from last year's first-round pick, Laquan Treadwell? He played 76 snaps and caught just 1 pass in his rookie season. But the most uncertainty is around the Vikings quarterback situation. Unfortunate, given the investment they've made at the position. They are the only team to use 3 first-round picks at quarterback since 2011. They drafted Christian Ponder and Teddy Bridgewater and traded for Sam Bradford over that span. Spielman insists he has absolutely no regrets. He said he would do the whole Sam Bradford over in a millisecond because he thinks he's really in the prime of his career now. But what about Bridgewater? When asked if the quarterback would play again, Spielman said, quote, "Well, everybody's hoping, but I'm not a soothsayer." That is ominous, not optimistic. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. It was very uncomfortable to read the quotes from Rick Spielman. It almost felt like you were worried about Teddy Bridgewater long term in terms of just being able to get fundamental movement and motion and things that they were talking about that they were worried about with Teddy Bridgewater. So certainly a much more significant injury. We all thought it was tough. We don't know where he's going. I'm sure Teddy's doing everything he possibly can, but the way that Spielman worded that made me very concerned about whether or not Teddy Bridgewater will ever be able to get back on the football field ever again. And that's a sad situation, but that happens to players before. We've seen this before where a player just can never come back from a significant injury.
So how does the team handle it now? So you have Bradford signed 1 more year. No one signed through 2018.
Last year when he signed that 2-year deal with Philadelphia, people said, well, why even bother with that second year? You got to figure that Carson Wentz, whoever they're going to draft, would end up being the starter in 2017 at the latest. Well, now it's actually a good thing for Minnesota to have that in the back pocket. The second year of Sam Bradford's security. And listen, for whatever you want to say about Sam Bradford, this offensive line was completely derailed, as you mentioned earlier, Susan. He actually played very well. He actually set the NFL record for single-season completion percentage. Was it a bunch of high-risk throws? No, but given the wide receiving group he had, the offensive line, and the complete lack of a running game, Bradford actually played pretty well for a team that at one point was considered an NFC favorite early on in the season. Perhaps Minnesota isn't as far off as we might feel like they are, given all these question marks.
Offensive coordinator Pat Shermer made the point, too, that you should see a huge jump for Bradford now that he has time to spend with his teammates. Not 8 days is pretty much what he had to get ready for the season. So they're optimistic about that.
Well, he's only going to make that jump if they can find a line to protect him as well. When you look at last year, I don't know that any offensive line suffered more than the Vikings line. You lose both of your starting tackles. You have injuries up front. They had at least 9 offensive linemen who missed a game last year because of injury. Those are significant, so they've got to address that issue up front, not only for the quarterback, for the guy we're looking at there, Adrian Peterson, if he were to come back. There's no way he's going to be able to run effectively if they can't block up front. 1.9-yard average last year before he got hurt.
Mark, what do you think about AD? How do you handle this?
Well, I think what I do first with Sam Bradford is the fact that I don't go quickly into a contract negotiation on this because 2 things. Number one, we were 8-8 with him, and he just had a career year in terms of completion percentage. And, yeah, I'd like to have a better offensive line and a better running back. But I also know Sam Bradford really has a poor history of staying healthy. Like, that was the first year I think Sam Bradford was able to play 16 games. So I don't think there's any rush as an organization to say, boy, we better get him done because he's got to be the quarterback of the future. I think you hit pause and realize you do have a franchise tag you could use if you had to going forward. As for Adrian Peterson, I think what Spielman did was set the table politely to say, hey, we may have a mutual parting here, but this is what the Combine's about. We think about all these young kids running around in shorts and draft-eligible players, but behind the scenes, right. Adrian Peterson's going to have a lot of discussions between the Vikings and his agent to find out whether there's a common ground that can be met.
Let's start here. There's just no way you pay him $18 million in 2017. I mean, just to give you an idea of perhaps where things are trending, I actually had someone from the Vikings organization text me recently, where's Adrian playing next year? That sort of tells you all you need to know. I mean, there's just no way $18 million can be spent on a player who, as Jim mentioned, less than 2 yards per carry last season. So the question then becomes this. If that's off the table, and if Adrian Peterson is going to take a major pay cut, would he want to stay in Minnesota? Would Minnesota want to keep him around? Or would he want to perhaps explore greener pastures? He's already been tweeting about some of the interesting Giants offseason moves. There's always been the speculation of him returning to Texas, his home state, to play with the Cowboys. All sorts of dot connecting. So I would not be surprised based on the tone, the financials involved, and everything else if Adrian Peterson is elsewhere in 2017.
You mentioned greener pastures.
I knew you were going to go there, Jim.
You know I'm going to go there. Green Bay would be a perfect fit for him. Now, we know Ted Thompson doesn't sign free agents very often, but I think this would be one of those exceptions. If you're a Green Bay fan, you would want. Because if you compare that running game with that passing game with Aaron Rodgers and the balance you then have there, wow, would that not be fun to watch?
And precedent set between those 2 organizations.
Absolutely. Right? Brett Favre coming out of retirement and going to play for the Vikings, So
just to tie the 2 things together, the quarterback, the running back, Peterson has played with 13 different starting quarterbacks in his career.
That's it? It kind of feels like more sometimes.
Oh, well,
I don't know.
That seemed like an awful lot.
That's a long time
It's
since
like a
2008.
Cleveland Browns stat there.
You're on NFL Insiders. Let's go up close and personnel on the Kansas City Chiefs because they have some major decisions to make at 3 key positions. So we're just guessing that John Dorsey is slightly stressed right now. Mark, take us through some of the major roster moves, especially the high-profile guys.
Yeah, I think the way to look at Kansas City right now is they've got roughly about $6.1 million worth of cap space. And what I've done here is I've set up this board where you've got Eric Berry. His tag right now, if you tag him a second time, is $13 million against the cap. Dontari Poe's franchise tag number would be $13.5 million against the cap. My personal opinion is you franchise actually Dontari Poe and you put him over here on the Kansas City's team. Now, what does that do? We got problems. We don't have enough cap space to even do that. So now we have to look over here on players that are on their football team. Nick Foles, you could actually release him from his contract and clear $6.8 million worth of salary cap room. But we still got problems. So we have to find another one. And it's no coincidence, I think, today that who'd the Kansas City Chiefs sign? C.J. Spiller, running back. So now that leaves Jamal Charles to be traded or maybe have to let him go. Once you do that, you could put him over here on this side, clears another $6.2 million worth of salary cap space, and voila, we've got now $5.5 million. Well, it's still got this guy named Eric Berry. So how do we handle Eric Berry? I think they're in heavy negotiations with Eric Berry over the next 2 weeks trying to get a deal done. Now, obviously, that's the cap number here that puts it 7.5. So what do you have to do? We got to work on getting Eric Berry's base salary and signing bonus to be about $5 million. Now, that sounds probably tough, but the one guy to go look at is Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu, obviously, of the Arizona Cardinals, last year did a deal. He got $15.5 million to sign. He got almost $40 million guaranteed in that contract. But his first-year salary last year was only $1 million, and his total cap hit last year was under $5 million. So if you look at the Tyrann Mathieu deal, you can get him under the salary cap, you can tag Poe, and you still have a little bit of money to mess around with maybe a Jarvis Jenkins or a Mike Pearson, depending on how you want to maneuver that roster. So this is probably the plan that they're trying to figure out. But the biggest thing is, do you go ahead and commit to Eric Berry? I think they should.
You have to commit to from my opinion, from this. The game is changing, and it's all about the pass game. And safety nows have become so much more valuable in terms of being able to go down in the slot, lock down receivers there, be able to play the run as well as play deep free. Eric Berry is that guy. And we always talk about numbers and production and that, but there are intangibles as well. Eric Berry brings a leadership and a presence to the locker room that not many players bring. So you got to be careful if you let guys like that walk out the door, the impact it has on his teammates in that locker room.
You know, the window to have a franchise tag decision closes on March 1st at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So you might say to yourself, was there even dialogue between Eric Berry and the Chiefs? Well, let's tie this back one more time. C.J. Spiller, who they signed today, he shares an agent with Eric Berry, Chad Speck. So at the very least, they've had they're at least in contact. You'd have to figure that when you're negotiating the particulars of C.J. Spiller's deal, this player, Eric Berry, came up more than a couple of times. I think the Chiefs understand the value, but it's a little bit of a tricky predicament. If you don't use the franchise tag on Dontari Poe and you do it on Eric Berry, it's a double tag situation. He may say, you know something? Sign the tender, I'll hit the open market next year. A lot of factors in play, which is why this, to me, is the most difficult tag situation for any team in football right now.
Really quickly, what's the time frame for all of this to get done?
Yeah, I think what you've got to do is you've got to get before the franchise tag because you don't want to have to make that decision because you don't want to let Eric Berry know that you've decided not to tag him. So you still have to play the game between the two agents, who are you going to go with. But you do have to be a little more open-minded this year with Eric Berry saying, I will go there with the contract because of who he is and what he means, like you've talked about even, Susie, in that locker room.
3-time first-team All-Pro. Yeah. And all the guys in the locker room will tell you, he's not just a leader on defense. He's a leader on offense, the whole team.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Right.
Absolutely.
You need to keep him around.
Absolutely.
Get it done.
Absolutely.
All right, we're talking Combine next. All part of the draft process. The NFL Scouting Combine gets underway next week in Indianapolis with 330 participants going through drills and interviews. One of the 6 workout drills is the bench press, a test for strength and endurance, 225 pounds, as many reps as the athlete can get. Phil Savage and Jeff Saturday with more on the bench press.
Welcome to the 225-pound bench press test. And as a former general manager in the NFL, I think this is probably the least important of all the exercises and drills and tests that the prospects are put through in Indianapolis. But nevertheless, it is more of an endurance test than a strength test. A couple things to remember for the prospect himself. Both feet on the floor, butt flat to the bench, and then when the player goes to lock the reps out, you want straight arms and then no bouncing off the chest. So Jeff Saturday, our able-bodied former NFL center, you're going to show us how it's done.
I'm going to say, remember from a player perspective, again, the reps touching your chest, not bouncing and locking out, because they'll take reps from you. So even if you do 30 plus, they may take it down for you. You never know, so you do have to follow the rules. And it just kind of shows you from a player perspective if the guy's been spending time in the weight room or has he not. That really is all it really tells you. Again, to Phil's point, it's an endurance test.
Yep. $30.
Yeah.
31. 32. Jeff Saturday, University of North Carolina, just racked 32.
There you go.
On the 225-pound bench press. As a comparison, last year, Cody Whitehair, all-rookie center for the Chicago Bears, he racked 16 reps. So the importance of this drill, Jeff, you finish it off.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You have to understand, again, it's an endurance test. How many you do, all it's telling you is, hey, when I get under here, can I push it? Have a bit spent time in the weight room, but you got to know you'll never do this test again. You hit the weight room with your facility, with your team, you won't ever do another endurance test like this.
So what does all that mean? I don't know. The guys that dominated this drill over the last decade aren't exactly household names. Stephen Pio owns the record with 49 reps. Dontari Poe is the only Pro Bowler among the top 10. Otherwise, not sure. For more on how much this really matters, here's Mark.
You know, the bench press, to me, has been one of the most overrated things in the National Football League Combine. I mean, really, it's all about just for show and kind of, being exciting because all the people at home want to watch it. But if you really want to make the bench press exciting to me, I think I found a new way to do it. Let me show you how we really should be bench pressing at the Combine and really make it more entertaining than it was right now. I'm going to take you right over here. Now, I got this right here. I got my man Damian Woody.
Yo.
And I got this guy named Field Yates. Now, Field may not be the biggest guy in the world, but he's about to get bench pressed because we're going to make this actually really entertaining. Come on over here.
All right.
All right, Damian. Let's see how many reps you can get
sideways?
with Field Yates.
All righty.
Let's see. Now
That's too easy.
that is entertaining. This is what I'm talking about. You want to make the bench press more entertaining at the combine? You get yourself a Field Yates and you get yourself a man like Woody, and I'll start paying the admission for this. But the other guys at the combine, if it was like this, I'm telling you, we'd all be watching every day, wouldn't we? You can stop now, man.
Lost track after 1,000 right there.
Woo! Rocket.
That is so funny. So in our morning meeting, Field offers up, can he help in any way demonstrating the bench press?
Wasn't quite what I had in
That's how the
mind.
conversation started, right?
Yeah.
That
I
was
feel like,
awesome.
Damian is like, now, you're my father now, apparently. Like, that was.
Phil, what do you have on my cornbread?
You probably could have done it with one arm, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Two Fields.
Yeah, he's not 225.
But here's the
my
thing.
gosh.
If Mark really wants us to pay attention to it, even pay money to see it, I want to see Field bench press Damian.
You're on
I'm not
NFL
trying to make that
Live.
work. I'm not trying to.
Maybe on the next
Can you
show.
make that work?
I want him to be healthy. I
gonna
want Field around for a long time. Here. He's not. That's not happening.
There would be a world with no me if we tried that.
Right,
So
yeah.
you guys make the decision how badly you want to see
we'll
that.
keep Field here on the insider's desk.
I have a free ticket to Indy every year. Like, I would volunteer just to be at the combine every year for that.
That was classic,
You-
by the way.
so
Thank
they-
you for
do anyone else just
sacrificing
bench press
yourself.
you?
Yeah.
Now, you've heard this many times. Free agency starts on March 9th, and it's important not to overlook restricted free agents. Take Chris Hogan, for example. The Patriots signed him off the Bills roster last season, and all he did was set a franchise playoff record with 180 receiving yards in the AFC title game. So we know that the terminology gets confusing. So let's start right there, Mark. What is a restricted free agent?
Yeah, a restricted free agent is a player that's got 3 accrued seasons under their belt. So what you'll see here is, you get it when you become a restricted free agent, the club has the right to tender you a 1-year qualifying offer. Then what happens is there's different levels to the restricted free agency you see here. Original tender, second-round tender, or a first-round tender. Now, what does that mean? Original tender means you're tendered at whatever round you were drafted or if you're undrafted, there's no compensation. What the club has the choice to do here is decide how much they want to. With the case of Chris Hogan, to make it easier, he was undrafted last year, and the Buffalo Bills, when he became a restricted free agent, decided just to give him the original tender. That means they received 0 compensation in terms of getting a pick back. Because if I gave somebody a good tender, like let's say the number one, to me, the best restricted free agent in this NFL class this year is this guy right here, Malcolm Butler. And what I would do if I'm the New England Patriots, I'm tender number 1, which is just about $3 million. If somebody steals them from me, I either get their first-round pick or I have the right to still match the contract and get to keep them. The second guy, though,
Taylor Gabriel was a game breaker for the Falcons.
right, explosive guy. That he had a lot of catches last year. He had 35 catches. He had 6 touchdowns for the Falcons. Really came on the second half of the season. He, again, was undrafted, so they're going to have to make a decision. How do they want to tender him, and are they worried about losing him? So,
And then finally, Isaiah Crowell, 4 100-yard rushing games last year.
yeah, and again, another undrafted player that made the National Football League. He had almost 1,000 yards rushing, certainly a physical running back, and they've got to make a decision here. Do we tender him to low men and be ready to, possibly, obviously match an offer? Do they tender him a 2, or do they tender him a 1 to make sure they get to keep him?
By the way, back to Hogan, Rex Ryan didn't want to let him go. He also wanted to move up for Odell Beckham Jr., right?